Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best practices and best ideas of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today's podcast is titled, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, 7 Steps to Genius Every Day. And we have on a great person to lead it, the person who wrote the book of that title. And that would be Michael J. Gill. Michael is the world's leading authority on the application of genius thinking to personal and organizational development. He works with visionary leaders to support them in nurturing a more innovative and human-centered cultures, and to inspire and equip them with the creative thinking tools and consciousness communication strategies that help translate ideas into reality. He is the author of 16 books, including How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, Innovate Like Edison, and Discover Your Genius. Michael's books have been translated into 25 languages and have sold more than 1 million copies. Well, I've really been looking forward to today's interview and podcast, and to give a little bit of context to the discussion, and I guess the titling of the book and the podcast kind of gives it away, Thinking Like Leonardo da Vinci and 7 Steps to Genius Every Day. So apparently there's 7 steps. We're going to learn about that. But we're going to go much deeper than that as well and cover a variety of different creative and thinking and kind of principles to be more creative and more effective during your day. And again, to give a little bit of depth of context to it, Michael, as I noted, is among the leading authorities on the application of genius thinking to personal and organizational development. For a transformational conversation, which is what we're going to have today, on reaching our full potential by applying these principles, these Da Vincian thoughts, I guess you could say, to our life. We're going to learn fundamental steps of Da Vinci's innovation process, which relies on curiosity, examination, uncertainty, physicality, and kind of whole brain thinking as clarifying experiences that can open us up to inspiration and achievement. Michael, welcome so much to the show.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. Let's get to it. Amazingly, Leonardo da Vinci was a world-class, let's see if I could get this all right, artist, architect, scientist, inventor, engineer, and pretty damn great at things like cooking and playing of musical instruments. Applying kind of the creativity and learning skills productively. I mean, this was a very special individual, but someone who did not rely solely on his inherent gifts. If you could talk a little bit, laying the foundation for our discussion, please.
Sure. Well, Leonardo did have extraordinary inherent gifts, but he approached them with what Carol Dweck of Stanford University calls a growth mindset. So in other words, he was always interested in learning and developing his capabilities. And that's because he was passionately curious. He wanted to know everything. He wanted to know the mind of God. Everything else was just details.
Yes, and I didn't want to ignore the fact that there was inherent gifts in him, but there have been others, I'm sure, throughout history that have been as talented, although a little hard to imagine, but yes, but have just simply not had the accomplishments and the breadth of those that he had. I mean, here's a true genius who maximized his ability. You know, when I hear people talk about great athletes like LeBron James and Michael Jordan, what I hear the real pundits say is not only were they in the top 1% athletically and physically, but they were the top 1/10 of 1% mentally and their capability, their mental fortitude. And we see that now in the best of the best, the Tom Brady's, the LeBron Jameses, and name a sport. There's going to be, the one in 100,000 that rise to the top. So I really find that intriguing about someone like Leonardo, who basically, where most people, is it deemed to believe that most people honestly only use a fraction of, let's call it, their powers?
Sure. And it is fascinating. I love that you brought up the basketball example, because I was watching The Last Dance and watching Michael Jordan, and when Kobe talks about how Michael was his hero and inspired him to his great achievements, and he wouldn't be who he is without Michael. And LeBron James says the same thing. And Michael had his heroes, Dr. J, Connie Hawkins, and so on. And right now, Kobe and LeBron and Jordan still inspire the next generation of players. So if you want to learn basketball, study Michael Jordan, study LeBron James, study Larry Bird. If you want to learn how to use your full human potential and access your genius, study Leonardo da Vinci.
That's a perfect cue. And let's get right into it. So as the book title notes, there's 7 steps, so to speak, that you identified. Why don't we start with the first one and take it from there?
Sure. The first principle for thinking like Leonardo da Vinci is curiosità. Curiosità, which translates, of course, as curiosity. Who are the most curious human beings? Of course, little children. It's our birthright of genius. Every child comes into the world wildly curious, tremendously imaginative, and brimming with life energy. That's our natural inheritance. Unfortunately, as we go off to school, frequently creativity, curiosity, imagination are not what's encouraged. Instead, we're focused on getting the proverbial right answer. And that gets worse frequently when we go to university, especially if you were in college and you had a professor who wrote the book. You have to pretty much feed back what the professor wants you to feed back. So a lot of us learn not to think for ourselves, and we have that natural curiosity stifled. So I like to help people experience a renaissance, a rebirth of their birthright. The first chapter of the book goes deep into contemplating the core questions that dominate your attention on a daily basis. And then I'll ask you a question. What questions could you ask that might change the quality of your life, that might empower your creativity, that might make your life more beautiful? So the questions we ask every day determine the quality of our lives, and we begin by questioning the core questions that drive our attention on a daily basis.
You brought up a very intriguing topic, and my audience is going to chuckle because they know this always happens with me. We are going to go down a rabbit hole. And I didn't know you were going to bring this up, so this makes me very excited. I completely agree with you relative to children and how they're naturally instinctive, curious, and they may experience as a toddler constant struggle and failure, learning how to walk, learning how to talk. Yet that doesn't stop them from still pursuing. But then once they reach a certain age where they're communicating, parents and teachers and others, it's almost frowned upon to experience failure. And then they get that cycle, that mentality. Let's go even a little deeper. School, I completely agree. Really is the last great creative development in school something like Montessori that encourages the opportunity of creativity, of experimentation, of failure. Really, the school teaches us things that are built around rote memory. Let's remember the capital of Montana. And if you want to be in certain industries, that is important. I agree with that. But in general, in today's world, and all we're seeing now, and how artificial intelligence, robotics, machines are going to take away a lot of the mundane tasks. What we're going to have left is our creativity, the arts, the opportunity to collaborate as humans together, emotional intelligence. All of that is not going to become less important. It's being amplified and amplified before our eyes with COVID-19. What do you think about that?
Amen, brother.
Okay. So, yes, yeah. Michael.
My friend Ken Robinson gave a TED Talk. It was one of the original TED Talks. It's still one of the most viewed ever.
Sir Ken Robinson, he's a legend.
Right. Yeah. Well, he wrote the foreword to one of my books. We've taught together around the world. And his famous talk is ask a question: do schools kill creativity? And of course, his answer is, yeah, you bet they do. But you make a really important point that these skills, the skill of thinking for yourself, the skill of creativity, the skill of thinking like Leonardo da Vinci, is becoming more and more important. Having said that, Leonardo, according to the first art historian, Vasari records that Leonardo asked so many questions that he confounded his schoolmaster. If he was in school today, he'd probably be put in some special ed class and given some sort of drug to manage him. Thomas Edison's mother had to remove him from school. His teacher said, young Thomas's brain is addled. Fortunately, his mother saw his genius potential, took him out of regular school, homeschooled him. You mentioned Montessori. Montessori's role model was Johann Pestalozzi, and Pestalozzi created the special school that Einstein's parents had to send him to, because he wouldn't have been Einstein if they couldn't find the school that recognized and encouraged our birthright of curiosità, of endless questioning, of imagination, of energy, of playfulness.
And I'm still going to stay in this rabbit hole. So most parents are not going to have the capability of making that change. It's very hard to get into Montessori. There's a limited number of them. Yeah, there's others that are good, but again, everyone can't do it. And there's a lot of politics in school, unions. Let's not even, I'm already getting in trouble, probably even bringing that up. So it's the role of the parent now to take responsibility. They're going to learn things regarding rote memory and memorization in school. And there, of course, mathematics and science is going to be important. Don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting it. But now we're basically saying it's up to the parents to encourage what? Music, the arts, reading, and to help kids feel their freedom and their creativity. And how do you think that parents should go about that besides listening to these 7 principles?
Well, that is one of my great passions, and part of my mission has always been to teach. I mostly work with companies, with organizations on creating more innovative cultures. I help leaders develop their ability to lead a creative business, a creative, positive work culture. But my vision has always been that those are the people who would then help change the schools. And in the meantime, while we're working on changing the schools, we can change ourselves. So my favorite thing I think somebody said about how to think like Leonardo da Vinci, a father wrote to me, he said, your book gave me everything I always wanted to teach my children, but didn't have the words to say. So my hope, my wish, my vision is that first, if you're a parent, don't wait to change the school. If you embody these principles, if your children see you being curious and open and learning, if they see your growth mindset, if they see you thinking for yourself, if they see you appreciating beauty, smiling like Mona Lisa in the face of uncertainty, using your whole brain, nurturing your body-mind connection, and making new connections and being creative, that will teach them more than anything you tell them or any school you send them to. So first is apply this in yourself and be the role model for your children through who you are and how you act, and behave. Then we can think about applying these principles in the framework of schools and curriculums. And that's been happening in all kinds of schools around the world, usually private schools that are sponsored by my corporate clients. I think you're in Connecticut. I did a program for Greens Farms Academy, which is an amazing school.
That's directly in my backyard in Westport.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I taught the lower school kids. I taught the middle school kids. I taught the seniors, and then I did an evening program for the parents, the administrators, and the board and the donors. And that was only one day, but that's the kind of school, which is already a great school, that is reaching out and wanting to implement and integrate this kind of curriculum. But in the meantime, whether or not you're lucky enough to have your kids in a school like that, this is what when Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world, this is the kind of thing he's talking about. You apply the principles in your own life. You become the model. And by the way, it's not just for your children. This is why if you're the CEO, if you're the leader of your organization, who you are speaks more loudly than anything you say. So embody leadership, embody creativity, embody innovation. We know now that emotions are contagious for better or for worse. So we need to be conscious about what we catch and spread. And we want to catch and spread optimism, enthusiasm, curiosity, intelligence, wisdom, thoughtfulness, caring. Those are good places to start.
Before we get to the second one, and I know we're going a little deep on this one, but I'm not really too constrained by time, but I do want to be respectful of you and the audience as well. How do adults that have some level of success, they're listening in, they're whatever, top 10 or 15% of what they do, there comes a point when you need to juggle, and pardon that pun, we'll get to that a little bit later. We'll leave the audience hanging on that, but how do you juggle between I'm confident in my capabilities, but I can't grow unless I have a beginner's mindset? How do I remain humble?
Well, if you're not humble, you're not paying attention. There's plenty that's out of all of our control. If you're not aware of that now, you may not become aware of it until you're on your deathbed, because everybody gets it eventually. And from that sense of humility, which, by the way, genuine humility correlates with openness, correlates with the growth mindset, correlates with accelerating the learning process, correlates with creativity, correlates with the ability to connect with and draw others to you and inspire other people. So the more successful people become, the easier it is to believe your own publicity. And this is why so many very successful people experience depression, anxiety, wind up having problems with addiction, just aren't happy despite all the achievements and so on. So it's time to consider the Peter principle. We can all rise to our level of incompetence. We can all reach the point where we've topped out unless we make some fundamental shifts and changes. But that's where the juice is. That's where the fun is in life, is in the, okay, great, you've accomplished this, you've done that. But rather than just resting on your laurels, go deeper, explore more, have more fun, learn more, let go.
And this is really an important one, this number one, this curiosity, which is why we are going a little deep. And I'm going to have yet one more question on it. How come the greatest creativity from the artist we know, not 100% of the time, but about 80 to 90% of the time, it generally happens before 30. Look at musical artists like rock and roll and rappers currently. My God, you're ancient in rap when you're probably 26, 27. Most of us don't listen to new forms of music, by the way, after age 33. So why does this artistic creativity in music, in the arts, in entrepreneurial and starting companies, look at Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates at a young age, how come so much of this happens before age 30?
Well, I don't know. I think Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett might disagree with you on this one.
Yeah, it gets better in your 90s.
In your 90s. And so first of all, I don't accept that premise. I think a lot of times the great accomplishment happened in the 20s or 30s is people died when they were 40 or 50 or 60 because lifespans weren't as long as they are now. And Leonardo da Vinci, more than 500 years ago, wrote as guidance to his students. He said, iron rusts from disuse. He said, water that does not flow becomes stagnant. Thus it is with the human mind. So if we don't have a growth mindset, yes, we will not continue to improve. But if we do, you can take examples from every realm, from classical music, from painting, from science, from Michael Jordan says he can still beat any player on the Charlotte Hornets one-on-one, and Mike Tyson is contemplating a comeback. I'd say the only area where that thesis might be valid is in intense competitive athletics, where there's some, because the physical body does not necessarily get better. We can maintain it much more so than people think. But here's the most important thing to understand for everyone listening and for your friends and your parents. Your brain is actually designed to improve with use. Now your knees aren't and your hips aren't. I know because I had a hip replacement and a knee replacement. They wore out. Thank God I could get a new one. But this is getting better because I use it a lot. My memory's getting better as I get older. I'd like your memory to get better. So it's a huge, I wrote a book about this to celebrate my 60th birthday. It's called Brain Power, Improve Your Mind as You Age. We now have evidence-based, research-validated practices for improving your cognition, your memory, your creativity as you get older. So,
yeah, I mean, my thought about some of it maybe more applies to musical artists, is they reach a level of success and have a certain amount of not a beginner's mindset anymore, of money, of resources, of other distractions they didn't have during the most hyper creative period, probably from 16 to 24, 25. But you bring up some good points to that. Interesting discussion. But to keep things going, because we spent a fair amount of time going down several rabbit holes on number one, which was curiosity, what would be the second of his principles?
So the second principle for thinking like Leonardo da Vinci is dimostrazione. Dimostrazione. It's the word Leonardo actually used in his notebook, urging his students to demonstrate things in their own experience. He said, think for yourself. He said, you must become an inventore, an original thinker. Of course, the challenge to independent original thinking during Leonardo's time was the strictures imposed by the church and the difficulty of getting access to information. Books were rare. If you could find one, it would be in Latin or Greek, which you would not have learned unless you came from a noble family. Leonardo da Vinci actually taught himself Latin when he was 40 years old, so he could read the classics as they became available. What's the challenge to independent thinking today? Well, you touched on it. There's too much information. How do you cut through the tsunami of spam to think for yourself and be an independent thinker? Well, Leonardo gives specific practical advice on how to do this. he says, on important issues, get different perspectives. He says, get at least 3 perspectives on any important issue or idea. So for just in practical terms, when he's painting, he wants to paint a flower in one of his paintings, but you'll see that before he paints the flower, he sketches that flower, of course, and he always sketches it from 3 different angles. There's a beautiful illustration of this on page 50 of the book. Each flower is exquisite, but you see that what he's doing is he's getting perspective so he can see it more deeply. When he wanted to learn about anatomy, he didn't just read other anatomy textbooks. He dissected more than 30 bodies himself, and he's the first we know of in history to do dissections from 3 different angles of entry into the body. And it's the same thing if you're a leader. The danger is, if you're a leader in an organization, we tend to surround ourselves with people who agree with us. And we want to be in a field that we have alignment, which is good, but the tendency, it happens unconsciously. It's all too easy to be surrounded by people who agree with you. And they think, well, gee, you're the boss, you're smart, so I'm going to agree with you. And you think I'm the boss, I'm smart, because you forgot the humility stuff we just talked about. So you think, yeah, see, everybody's validating me. This is great. Instead of what really creative, innovative leaders do, which is look for well thought out, contrarian opinions and different ways of looking at things. This is the non-politically correct value of diversity for an innovative organization. It's not diversity predicated on external elements, it's diversity of thinking. We can cultivate that diversity of thinking, but put forth and lead a framework of open communication where we respect differences. Then we create what Linda Hill from Harvard calls creative abrasion, which is, it's also, by the way, what makes a marriage great. It's when you can disagree in a way that is respectful and energizing and makes everybody better, instead of just having to have people who agree with you all the time. So this is getting deep into dimostrazione, but it's a huge part of your own creativity, is challenging your own beliefs and assumptions. And the easiest thing to do is just start by challenging your own limiting beliefs. We just challenged one that a lot of people hold is, well, I can't improve as I get older, and my best days are behind me, and so on and so forth. Well, rubbish. And I've got the evidence to back it up.
I hope it's true. It'll be good for me. I'll get more creative into my 50s here. And there are some people, I'm forgetting who, that like pick up a paintbrush at age 59, 60. There's been a couple of them, and it's a gift, or maybe from their experiences and how their mind thinks differently now than 30 years ago, and they're amazingly talented. So I'm going to hold out hope. Digging a little deeper into that number 2, that testing, this reminds me a little bit of Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn and amazing VC, when he's dealing with really talented entrepreneurs. And I'm going to mess this up a little bit, but he basically is like, enough. You have the idea, you're starting to do it. Why don't you go out and test it and start to see if it works? You're looking for perfect. You're not going to get it. You need to adapt, but you need to get it out there to see how people like it. So this relates to going from theory to practicality, and you're proving if it works. Another example that I'll give in the world of investing that we're very active in, Michael, is you have people that are professorial economists, great IQs, very educated, but they're not out there in the trenches investing. They're thinking about theory. When, you give me something like the character Bobby in Millions, like this hedge fund manager that was scrappy. He or she is living in the trenches. They're actually doing it. Do you think that people get caught up in not having the guts to actually just go out and put it forth in the world.
Well, I think a lot of people are afraid of failure. And unfortunately, as Ken Robinson points out, as we discussed earlier, frequently school makes us risk averse, and people's sense of self-worth gets tied to whether they're right or wrong, whether they're succeeding or failing. So they become overly risk averse. Of course, the opposite is also true. Imprudent risk isn't wise either. So finding this harmony, it's the harmony of yin and yang between theory and practice, between idea and testing. And this is dimostrazione. This is part of the heart of dimostrazione, is test it out. But be wise in your testing. So this is something from the genius of Thomas Edison. Edison said, understand scale-up effects. When Edison's first goal, he wanted to illuminate the world. So the first thing he needed to do was to find the right filament for the light bulb so he could get it to burn reliably, so he could measure the power, so he could turn it into a business. He failed innumerable times, but eventually made the breakthrough. And once he got the light bulb to burn for 13 and a half hours, he knew he could illuminate the whole world. But the next thing he did was to light his house in New Jersey at Christmas. That was the first test of a lighting system. Can you imagine walking past Thomas Edison's house in New Jersey and all of a sudden there's electric light? Nobody ever saw it before. He then tested it out on a ship in New York Harbor because it was a self-contained system. If he could get the lighting system to work on a ship, he could debug it. So the next big experiment was the Pearl Street neighborhood. I'm pointing that way because that's where New York is. The next was a 1 square mile neighborhood in New York City, the Pearl Street neighborhood, which was the first urban area. It was the first social public area to be illuminated. And that test worked. And within a year, the whole world was illuminated. So these great geniuses, they're always trying to figure out great things. How do I illuminate the planet? But then translating it into practice and testing it out and scale it up. So you're controlling the risk level. Edison didn't just say, okay, I have the light bulb, let's just try to illuminate everything right away. Disaster.
Very well said. Let's go on to what would be principle number 3.
Principle number 3 is sensazione. Sensazione. Sharpening the senses. Leonardo said the 5 senses are the ministers of the soul. And he trained his own sensory awareness like an Olympic athlete trains their body for competition. But 500 years ago in Tuscany, Leonardo wrote that the average person looks without seeing, hears without listening, breathes in without awareness of aroma or fragrance, touches without feeling, eats without tasting, and talks without thinking. That was 500 years ago in Tuscany. So he gives really practical advice here, which is based on Plato. The Renaissance is a rebirth of the great Greek ideals of human power and potentiality, human creativity. And Plato's guide to develop creativity and nurture the soul was to be surrounded by beauty and to contemplate beauty in various forms. And Plato noted that as we do that, beauty suffuses into our soul, so we become one with the beautiful. And for Plato, the beautiful was connected to the true and to the good. So Western philosophy, our whole civilization, is organized around the quest for truth, beauty, and goodness. And how do those 3 elements interrelate rather? So Leonardo says, contemplate beauty in your daily life. How do you make your life more beautiful? There's a good question. How do you make the lives of the people that you interact with every day more beautiful? And what's beautiful about asking the question is it shifts. This is how that's why curiosità is the first principle. Because if you start thinking about this, your life's already more beautiful. You've oriented your curiosity in a way that is uplifting and will change your perception. Like as I say that question to you, I just happen to look out my window here and I see the blossoms in the back of my yard, and I'm just seeing them in a fresh new way. I might not have noticed them if I hadn't brought my attention to that question. So you change your perception based on the questions you ask every day. And how do you make others' lives more beautiful? How do you make if you have employees, how do you make their day more beautiful? Because you make their day more beautiful, they're going to make your business more beautiful. They're going to make your clients or your customers' lives more beautiful. And then we live in a more beautiful world.
It sounds good to me. For a change, I don't have too much to comment on. I think that was wonderful. Why don't we go on to number 4?
Well, that's good. See, I hope to move you into number 4, which is sfumato. And that's the term art critics coined to refer to the hazy, mysterious quality you see in Leonardo's paintings. And what it represents is maybe the most significant characteristic of highly creative people, which is our ability to embrace the unknown and the uncertain. Makes sense if you think about it. Creativity is discovering something new. Innovation, the nova in innovation means new. But what that presupposes is you're going to have to let go of the old. You may have to change habit. You may have to let go of, as my friend Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book, says, what got you here won't get you there. So this means when we let go, a lot of us don't want to let go because we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of the uncertain. We get anxious. We want to have the illusion that we're controlling things. But it's inevitable in any case. It's the nature, no ego, no person can control what happens in the greater world. We're all very aware of that at the moment. We can control how we respond to it, and we can either respond with fear, we can respond by making it worse and making it uglier, or we can respond by contemplating questions like, how can I make it better? How can I be of service? And how can I make life more beautiful? So we do have that power of choice. But the fundamental point here is great leaders, creative innovators open and expand in the face of the unknown and the uncertain. And this, I see this a lot when like now, I'm seeing it now. I have a client in New Jersey. He runs a national business. It's a family business. And he's been speaking to his team on a regular basis, doing town halls for the company on Zoom, sending regular messages of encouragement to everybody. And this is, the company's been really hard hit. They've had to furlough 40% of the team. He's been calling the people who are furloughed on a regular basis. But it's a hugely uncertain time, but he's manifesting leadership by being reassuring without giving people any bull. He's being very realistic, very cognizant, managing the business, but serving as a leader by reminding people, first of all, that he cares, which he genuinely does, and you can't fake that, especially in times like this. And really thinking about how to look after everybody, serve their clients. His business is going to come out stronger as a result of this. His business will grow. His team is going to love him even more, and they're going to work even harder. They already are, because he's able, in the face of this grave uncertainty, to maintain his center, I work with him on we crafted the higher purpose for his company, the mission and the values for his company, and the strategies for really living them. So it's great to have a client who, when times get tough, goes deeper into the purpose, deeper into the mission, deeper into the values, and integrates that, believe me, with the financial metrics. So this is leadership, and this is when it counts. And this is sfumato, the ability to smile and maintain your center in the face of uncertainty and change and ambiguity.
After we do the 7, we're going to circle back somewhat to that relative to how companies are adapting or could adapt during COVID-19. Unlike number 3, this is what I may have some follow-up on. You said something that I think was really important. You really only control how you feel and how you respond. So I learned this acronym from a well-known speaker, Tim Kite. It's called ERO, event plus response, helps to determine outcome. The only one of those that you have 100% control over is going to be the R, your response. Taking what you said and putting a little different twist on it, there's something that I've spoken about when I do some speaking roles to younger ones and entrepreneurs, and that's being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I'm not the originator of these ideas, but one of them would be go into a hotel and say, I'd like to get a 50% discount. Walk into Starbucks and say, I don't really want to pay the full retail price. Would you mind giving me a 20% discount? And not a good one in today's times, but into a crowded mall, and people are going to chuckle at this, but I've done it. It's intriguing. And randomly, as you're walking, just stop and lay down on the floor and be eerily quiet for 10 seconds. It's going to be very uncomfortable, very. And then just get up as if nothing happened and continue. Do you think that we could develop a toughness, a grit to doing things that make us uncomfortable? Does that carry through to real life and business?
Well, my response to that, I would say life will make you uncomfortable enough. You don't have to go lie down on the floor or try to get a discount.
Leave that to me.
Yeah, just like there's a pandemic. Is that not making you a little bit uncomfortable? There's always going to be something. So you get mosquito bites or bed bugs. Something's going to happen. Life will make you plenty uncomfortable. You don't have to go out of your way. I mean, as you said, I'm a martial artist, so for fun, for many years, I have people try to hit me with a stick. So yes, there is something to be said for pushing yourself and putting yourself into challenging situations so that you learn to stay centered in the face of difficulties or challenge. But life will bring them to you. And I love the ERO thing, event. You said event, response, outcome. So I'd like to just offer an expansion of that acronym. Let's make it HERO. Start with a sense of humor about yourself and everything. Then the event, then the response, then the outcome is going to be even better. And then your acronym becomes HERO.
Well, thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that from you.
The thing is, amateurs borrow, professionals steal.
Hey, it's a great compliment to both parties. Let's go on to number 5. What is principle number 5?
5 is arte scienza, balance art and science, logic and imagination, use your whole brain. It's why we tend to think of Leonardo as history's greatest genius. He created some of the greatest art, the Last Supper, the Mona Lisa, ever manifested. And he was hundreds of years ahead of his time scientifically, not to mention that he was a genius of invention as well. So he integrated the artistic and the scientific elements of mind. And this is one of the keys to genius. School tends to put us in one path or another. Oh, you're good in math, you're good in science, you go this way. Oh, you're more artistic, you go this way. That's because we tend to have this disconnected idea of what our potential is. If you look at the top level scientists, for example, everybody has a STEM program today. A lot of my science, technology, engineering, math. Mm-hmm. I was actually speaking to a group of 2,000 engineers for a big conference in the Denver Convention Center, and they had a STEM program. But then I showed them. I have this in my PowerPoint graph. Members of the National Academy of Sciences are 1.7 times more likely than average scientists or technologists or engineers to have an artistic pursuit. Members of the Royal Academy are 1.8 times, the British equivalent, and Nobel laureates are 2.8 times more likely to have an artistic pursuit. In other words, when you integrate art and science, your science is way better. And when you integrate science and art, your art is way better. So I turned STEM into STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And Leonardo is the supreme role model for that.
For sure he is. That's a great example. I really love that one. What would be principle number 6?
Corporalita, balance the body and the mind. So we know Leonardo is renowned as a great scientist, a great artist, but he was also gifted physically. He was the strongest man in Florence. He was a master fencer, an equestrian. He gives amazing advice 500 years ago on how to preserve your own health and wellness. He says, learn to preserve your own health. Today we call that holistic health. He says, avoid grievous moods, keep your mind cheerful. He knew that attitude affects the immune system moment to moment. He said, eat a healthy, wholesome diet of the freshest foods you can find. Get moderate exercise every day, especially walk in nature if you can. Have a little red wine with dinner, get plenty of rest. What else do you need to know?
That pretty much covers it all. We'll go a little bit into that one. Did he practice, it might not have been called it back then, but effectively what amounts to mindfulness, meditation, any of that?
Yes. He didn't go to a yoga class or something. He spontaneously connected via the observation of nature. He was so in love with nature. And you find this with a lot of great geniuses. For many of these great, and this is why genius is accessible to all of us. It's why I emphasize the importance of how can I make my life more beautiful. He was so in love with the beauty of creation. He felt it was his mission to try to mirror that in his work. So being in nature, looking at the sky, this is a meditation, this is mindfulness. You don't have to go to a class. I mean, you might need to go to a class because our lives are so crazy and filled with mechanistic stuff, and people are on their devices and on all sorts of social media and so on and so forth. So you may need to put that down, and instead of looking at pictures of nature on your device, look out the window. But this was Leonardo's practice, was appreciation of beauty in the moment. And that's why, see, this is what happens with great art. This is what happens when you listen to Beethoven or Mozart or Bach, or you look at a painting of Da Vinci or Raphael or Michelangelo, just to choose 2 particular areas of art. These, you listen to these or you see these and you connect to everything. You are one with creation. That's the genius of great art. It reminds us, it gives us the experience of our connectedness with all of life and all of creation. I was in Vienna. I was lucky enough, I was blessed to be a speaker at the Peter Drucker Global Forum in Vienna this year. And I went early so I could spend a couple days touring around, and I went to the great museum there that was having a phenomenal exhibition of Albrecht Dürer. And first of all, I love watching the people who are watching the art, because people were transfixed by the art. And what was particularly delightful for me, because I've always loved Dürer, but Dürer went to Italy and tracked around to see everything he could of Leonardo da Vinci's. And that's what inspired him. So Leonardo da Vinci was Michael Jordan. Albrecht Dürer was Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. But what was super cool is, just like everybody marvels at those great athletes, all these people of different walks of life were looking at these Dürer works. And there's one famous one he has of a rabbit. And why is this rabbit so interesting? Because somehow in that rabbit is all of creation. Somehow in Beethoven's Ninth is all of creation. And in anything that Mozart touched, or Bach's Air on a G string, all in Raphael, any one of his portraits, anything that Michelangelo touched, all of creation is there. So, if you go on one of these mindfulness training seminars, they'll have you contemplate a raisin for 20 minutes. And that's a wonderful thing to do, because, suddenly you notice the texture of it and the feeling of it and the smell of it. And then you taste it and you're paying attention to the raisin, and you never tasted a raisin like that before. That's really cool. I do the same thing with my clients with fine wine. It's way more fun.
And we're heading to the last one, number 7, but then I have a whole bunch of kind of round robin questions. But what would be principle number 7?
Connessione. Everything connects to everything else. So Leonardo was a systems thinker. This is what we're just talking about. Is it great art helps us feel connected. So, by the way, it is great business. Great business has a connection to a higher purpose beyond just profit. It has a mission. It has clearly defined values that don't change no matter what happens in the external world. It has a strategy. It has goals. It has recruiting and hiring. It has incentive and compensation. It has training and development. And then what leaders do is they connect. They look for, where are we out of alignment between what our highest purpose, our mission, and our values, and what we're actually doing, and how we're interacting with all our stakeholders, with our vendors, with our communities, with our partners, of course, with our clients and our customers. So leadership, again, is about seeing connections. It's about seeing relationships. It's about seeing the big picture. And as we become more senior as leaders, what's our real role? What's our real task? It's to be more creative, more skilled in meeting more human needs. The more we can meet human needs in creative, positive ways, the more successful we can be in our enterprise, the more fulfilled and happy we can be, and the better world we can make.
I'm looking at some responses that are coming in, and people are, so far, thankfully for me, really enjoying it. But we do get someone who's questioning a little bit of systems thinking relative to be truly creative. Perhaps there is no system. And I simplified what's a very, very long paragraph, but how would you debate that question? Is it good to have parameters, processes, and systems, or to be truly creative, you got to break that and start something new?
First of all, I love the spirit of that question. So thank you very much. And to me, the way I just resonate to that is, you have the touch, just let go of all sense of structure. So in the creative process, part of the structure of the process of creativity is that there's a phase of the process in which you act as though there is no structure. So you suspend, what if it wasn't like this? What if we were starting this over again? What if we were beginning this today? So that you can do completely fresh thinking and suspend all your preconceptions. But that's just one phase of the process.
And you mentioned Carol Dweck, who's a legendary figure earlier, but also at Stanford, decades ago came what we know as design thinking. And no, we don't need to do an hour on that. I'll get someone from Stanford on that. But design thinking, brainstorming, and that involves having a certain 5 steps and processes. So even in that, there's a certain rigor relative to steps in being creative. I mean, I went through one exercise. It took a paper clip, And they said, what could you do with the paper clip? Well, I could put sheets of paper together. Well, okay, duh, we know that. I mean, think really out of the box. What could you do with a paper clip? I can make a weapon out of it. I can make an art piece out of it by bending it. I can make an earring out of it, a nose ring. I could close flaps of a turkey with stuffing in it. I could puncture a piece of paper. Basically, they wanted me to think of like 70 different things, which was hard after about 10 or 20. And I thought that was an interesting exercise. Does any of that design thinking relate to some of the things that Leonardo did inherently?
Well, yeah, Leonardo was the original design thinker. And that paper clip test is called the alternate use test. And it comes from the original Torrance test of creativity. And what it tests is mental fluency, which is very important in the generation phase of the creative process. So I'll take you through it really quickly since we're onto this, and it's so important. The first phase is the phase in which we consider what is the question, what is the problem, what is the challenge that we are concerned with here. And it's probably the most important phase. And when I've talked to, I've gotten to know a number of Nobel laureates and people with lots of patents who've turned them into very successful businesses. And what they all tell me is the most important phase for them is figuring out the most creative way to frame the question. So they do a lot of research. They collect a lot of data to focus on. I'll give you a really simple practical example of this. The Olympics. For years, the Olympics lost money every year. Peter Ueberroth came along one year, and by the way, he was a student of my friend Edward de Bono, the founder of lateral thinking, which is another way of branding creative thinking. Very creative way to rebrand creative thinking so you can write more books about it. But what everybody got together in the Olympics every year, the committee got together and said, how can we lose less money than they did last time? Well, with the help of Peter Ueberroth, Edward de Bono rather, Peter Ueberroth and his team got together and said, the obvious, we'd all would say, well, I can think of a better way to frame that question. How can we make money? But this is where systems thinking comes in. This is where Condizione came in. Because if you just made money out of the Olympics, but you destroyed the brand and the spirit of the Olympics, that wouldn't be a real success. So Ueberroth and his team reframed the question, how can we make the Olympics profitable in a way that strengthens the brand of the Olympics and the spirit? And the result was a $250 million profit. Ueberroth was Time Magazine Man of the Year. He was awarded an honorary gold medal. And that $250 million profit still funds youth sports programs in the greater LA area to this day. So the way we frame the question can make a huge difference to what we wind up discovering. So that's the first phase. And a lot of times when you ask the question, when you do all your homework and you get lots of people engaged and you're willing to have strong debate right at the beginning, you already know what to do. You'll solve a lot of your problems in your organization if you have a really good phase of contemplation of what is are we asking the right question? Is there a better way to phrase this? Is there something we don't know? Is there somebody who already solved this problem? What problems will we solve by solving this problem? So you think that's how a systems thinker begins the creative journey. Then after that phase, if you still need new ideas, that's the generation phase. And that's when you say, okay, if we were reinventing everything, anything goes, that's the paper clip exercise. Give me 90 uses of a paper clip. I've led that test for my students for years. People used to send me newspaper clippings, and now they send me email links to, a paperclip was used to fix a nuclear submarine, emergency tracheotomies. I do this, but the great thing is, when I do this for kids at gifted programs, they get genius scores. When I do it for my corporate clients, they get 4 out of 4 answers per minute, which is the international average, because they've clamped down on the generation phase. So in the generation phase, we take the clamp off, we take off any limitations, it's free flow, anything goes. You go for sheer quantity of ideas. Then a phase that's everybody knows intuitively, but people who run organizations don't understand how to apply it until I teach them how to do it. That's the incubation phase. This is where you are when you get your best ideas. Most people find they're resting in bed, they're walking in nature, they're in the shower, they're riding in their car. They're not in the office. And one of the biggest weaknesses people have when they try to solve problems together is maybe they know about brainstorming, maybe they know about design thinking, so they get their team together and they try to think of lots of ideas. And even if they're good at doing that, they notice that there's no breakthrough that happens in that meeting, because that's very rare. The breakthrough is going to happen at 4 o'clock in the morning, or when you're driving in your car or in the shower. But if you get everybody in your team to do what Leonardo told his students to do, which is take a little notebook with you wherever you go and write down your ideas. Then you have your team come back the next day and share those ideas. Then you're really getting into some juicy creative process together. Of course, then you have to shift to the evaluation mode, and then ultimately the implementation mode. And these different modes require different cognitive strengths. So it's really important to get a team that has a balance of these strengths, and then to know how to orchestrate that team and know how to shift from one mode to another. So this is what we teach organizations how to do, and then it becomes a lot easier to be creative and be innovative, and more fun, by the way.
You segued so perfectly, it's shocking, into my next question, which relates exactly to what you just built up and just said. And it relates to companies adapting under crisis, to playing out what-if scenarios. Let me use the word to being stress tested, practice before the real problem hits. So what I'm getting at is there's an initiative that I created inside of my organization. We'll be rolling it out in a couple of weeks. But I had to rethink it several different times, and using, apparently, I'm a basketball fan now, using the analogy of the terminology for the 92 Olympics, basketball Barcelona was called the Dream Team. So I created a dream team of so-called family office experts to go in a 3-day window and stress test, play out what-if scenarios, and challenge the processes and thinking inside a family office. My problem is, I might know a thing or two myself, but okay, I know expert attorneys, I know expert accountants, I know expert technology people. I got a dream team, but then I thought to myself, part of that is correct, but how about I bring in people that know nothing about a family office? They're just hyper creative. It might be an architect, it might be someone in brainstorming and creative thinking, it might be an artist. Am I correct that having technically proficient people is a part of the solution, but you also need to have people that know, like most of the population, really nothing about the entity that's a family office to truly turn it on its head and make it better?
Yes, and I think this goes back to the point that someone made about when you suspend the structure and you suspend the sense of the system. So it's the emperor, the child who sees that the emperor has no clothes. You need people who aren't hypnotized by your structure of how you think of things, who are able to look at things with fresh eyes. While we all develop our own ability to look at things with fresh eyes, sometimes it helps to just bring in somebody who really has them in relationship to whatever your area of concern happens to be. So yes, I think that's a wonderful idea.
We probably have time for maybe 2 more topics to jump into. You also hinted at this one, the neurocognitive capabilities, primarily cognitive flexibility, and how that interacts with emotional intelligence, executive function. And when you were talking about Leonardo, in my opinion, talk about being an amateur, in my opinion, I think you nailed it when it came to music, when it came to the arts, marrying the left brain with the right brain. What do you think about the importance, especially as we age and so-called our brain is fully developed? I think they say at 26, but do we get rigid in our cognitive flexibility, and how do we keep it fluid?
So let's just update everyone, because that's what we used to think, that your brain was rigid at 27 or 30, and that it would decline from that point on. But that's just not true. That's been completely overturned. This is like a Copernican revolution of neuroscience. So neuroscientists are not the kind of people who make up new words casually. So perhaps you've heard the term neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Neuro means brain cell. You've got 100 billion of them. Plasticity means changeable or flexible, adaptable. So when Leonardo said that we can change and develop our minds as we get older, and he was a great example of that himself, it turns out he was anticipating what we would discover just in the last 30, 40 years. So this is new, and it hasn't yet been integrated into our language. People still, they talk about, if anybody forgets something after they're 30 years old, they say, oh, I'm having a senior moment. But you talk to any 8-year-old or a teacher of 8-year-olds, how much stuff do 8-year-olds forget every day? Plenty of it. If the teacher says to an 8-year-old, you forgot your iPhone, kid doesn't say, oh, I'm 8 years old and my memory's going. They don't say, I'm having a junior moment. So we've taken this attitude that we use to limit our sense of our own potential as we get older, and then we collude with one another by commiserating and talking about that means to be miserable together, and people talk about how they're not what they used to be and all that nonsense. Well, I don't indulge in those conversations, and therefore I'm blessed to have a different reality. So neuroplasticity tells us we can improve our minds as we get older. The only question, and that's not even up for debate anymore. If you, the book is it's called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. I met Norman. He's a great guy, and he did this is clinical neuroplasticity. This is going in and helping people recover from strokes that you're not supposed to be able to recover from by utilizing applied neuroplasticity. Story after story, things that seem like miracles, but now they're understood by science. So what if we apply that same thinking, not just to recovering from some difficulty, but to optimizing our potential as we get older? And the secret of that is, of course, learning something new. So I talked to Dr. Dan Amen. You might have seen him on PBS. He wrote.
Yeah, he's very well known.
He's a great guy. He wrote a beautiful blessing for my book on brain power. And I talked to him. I said, look, there was a study, New England Journal of Medicine. Everybody's probably still familiar with it. If you do crosswords or play chess, these are things to help prevent Alzheimer's and strengthen your brain as you get older. But I said to Dan, what if some people don't want to do crosswords or play chess? There must just be a fundamental principles here about how do you improve your brain as you get older. And what we came up with, learn something new every day, and the more challenging it is, the better. So when we were growing up, we thought, oh, if I'm not good at it, don't do it. The secret, one of the big secrets of getting better as you get older, is do something that you're not good at. Do the thing you always wanted to do, but thought maybe I couldn't learn tango, or I couldn't learn Tai Chi, or I couldn't learn to speak Chinese, or whatever it is. Learn the thing that you thought you couldn't do, because when you challenge your brain every day, it recruits the circuitry that may have been dormant for the last 20 or 30 years, and it starts to wake it up. So the brain is designed to improve with use. The best way to improve it, learn to think like Leonardo da Vinci.
And that also segues well into my last question that we've discussed during COVID-19, although I'm going to focus a little more on the youth, whether grammar, high school, college, but it really applies to everyone. especially in the greater New York area where we've been kind of quarantined now for going on about 7 weeks. And again, this is going to be a longer process than we all would like. It is what it is. But henceforth, you have people getting anxious, getting depressed, and not keeping abreast of their eating, of their health, and of expanding themselves, about being gritty and resilient, taking this time to learn, maybe general assembly about how to code or be something relative to technology or marketing of it, learning a second language, music, tango, meditate. Those all sound good. And I think people know that they should be doing that, but I've been a little disappointed that many of them, especially let's call them the younger millennials and Generation Z, are not quite taking that to heart. Maybe I'm too preachy with them.
Well, I mean, first of all, we can empathize. I mean, it's a frightening time, and it's unprecedented, really, for all of us. Unless we're alive during the Spanish flu, which most people around now aren't. This is an unprecedented event in our lives, and the unknown is frightening. So I think it's important it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel anxious about it, and not to feel bad that you feel frightened. No, that's a normal human reaction. Then the question is, okay, I honor my feeling. What am I going to do? How am I going to respond? And how does my response affect my ability to make the most of this situation? And how does it affect others? Remember, we said before, emotions are contagious. Emotions are more contagious than COVID, right? For better or for worse. So you have a choice, just like you, for example, you wash your hands. I actually, the first week of this, I wrote a paper on Leonardo da Vinci's advice for dealing with coronavirus. It's on my website. It's on michaelgelb.com. If people go to the blog, they can download it. I also made a video for my friends in Italy who were really suffering at the time. Turns out the video applies to everybody, because Leonardo lived through pandemics that were much worse than anything we're dealing with. 30% of the people in Milan died of the Black Plague in 1 year while Leonardo was living there. How did he respond? He came up with plans to redesign the city for greater hygiene and what today we would call social distancing. And he did this purely by his own observation of where seemed to be the greatest incidences of the spread of the plague. So he responded to it in an amazingly creative way. And he also, all the principles are a curriculum for helping guide us through these challenging times and being more resilient. What kind of question are you asking every day? Are you reacting to every single headline or text or social media thing you get? Are you pausing and centering and trying to really validate and corroborate this real information in this time? Are you focusing on beauty, or are you obsessing about all the bad news? Are you embracing the unknown? Can you smile like Mona Lisa in the face of this uncertainty? Are you studying both the science, but also sharing are you aware of the amazingly beautiful artistic expressions that people are making? The Juilliard students put together a dance and music concert with dancers and musicians in different parts of your Zoom screen, all harmonizing together, and they sent it out for free. And there's a wonderful sharing of artistic uplift that's happening in a stronger way than under normal times. Corporalita, look after yourself, look after other people. And that's, so when you wash your hands, do it with a sense of loving protection, not with a sense of fear. When you are, we walk along, when you pull up your mask, and when people walk by, do it with a sense of caring protection for everybody. So we have the inner freedom to adapt our attitude in a way that makes a huge difference. By the way, when you do that, when you do what I'm saying, when you shift your attitude to caring and protection, the irony is you strengthen your immune system. when you focus on the fear and you indulge in it, you weaken your immune system. So choose to strengthen it. And when you smile and bring people's attention to beauty and creativity and kindness and love, you strengthen their immune system too, because of mirror neurons. I'm really not kidding. You're the little tiny ways that we change the world. And if there's one practice that can help sustain people, that strengthens the immune system, this is how I start every single day. Before I get out of bed, I reflect on gratitude. I reflect on all the blessings in my life. I feel, the sense of gratitude. I'm blessed. I'm quarantined with my wife. We're together 24/7 for 2 months. We're both blissfully happy. Thank you, God. I mean, that's a huge blessing. But I'm so grateful for her. I'm grateful to be able to have conversations like this with you and these wonderful people. I'm grateful for the creative projects that I'm working on. I'm grateful for that beautiful blossom outside my window. And when you remember to be grateful and focus on what you're grateful for, you strengthen your immune system and you shift your mind to see more things for which you're grateful. So this creates a positive feedback loop for your health and your experience. And we know your brain works 31% better when you're in a good mood. So
that's a great answer to the question on current times with COVID-19.
Yeah.
For individuals, families, companies, family offices that would like to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
Thank you. Well, michaelgelb.com, GELB, takes you into my books, lots of articles, lots of video. And healingleader.com is my website for executive leadership coaching and life coaching, which is much of what I'm actually doing with leaders today, with all kinds of folks, is guiding them on a one-to-one basis, applying all this to helping them lead their organizations and live more beautiful lives. So that's healingleader.com.
Excellent, Michael. In terms of my close here at the meeting, the video, the podcast, everything, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of Angelo Robles's Effective Family Office Podcast and the founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to highly successful families and their family offices. We do proprietary content and have now, I've been as creative as I've ever been, more content than ever, from master classes to writing to more books in the works. So for my membership, simply stay tuned. And these podcasts certainly are a part of it as well. And we host global programming. Now that's a little bit on hold with COVID, but simply, again, we adapted to do effectively what's amounting to daily online video meetings, some of them that we open up to a bit of a larger audience, but in general, keep it for the most part closed to our membership, and providing peer-to-peer with their peers, or some that we do, or guest experts like Michael and many others in the world of business, finance, philanthropy, science, medical, philosophy, all of that. It's been a lot of fun for me to be able to do this. If you'd like to find out more, follow me on Instagram, which is Family Office Association, YouTube, where this will be on a video as well. That would simply be Family Office, or reach out to me at familyofficeassociation.com, angelorobles.com, and likely preferred email, angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Thank you all for listening in or viewing in live. Thank you for those that see this on YouTube or the podcast. We hope you enjoy it. And especially a thanks to Michael J. Gill, an amazing guest. I look forward to the next time. Michael, thank you so much.
Grazie mille. Ciao.
Ciao.